shot at $1,000 right now. Text the keyword BILLS to 200-200. You'll get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info. Standard data and message rates apply. That's BILLS to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Wow, is it that time already? It's after 6 o'clock. It's a Monday morning. Where did that weekend go? I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I'm Ross. Thanks so much for starting your day with me and starting your week with me. We're going to do some live stream on YouTube today. I'm looking for an easy way to find it, and I think if you just go to YouTube, youtube.com, and type Ross Kaminsky in the search bar, then I think you'll see something that's got like my face in a circle, and you click there, and then you can subscribe there, and I hope that you will. Oh, look at that. That's me with the shirt I'm wearing today, so this must be happening right now. So you can check out the live stream. You can kind of like the Limbaugh Ditto Camp thing, except I just don't do a lot of dittos. Anyway, hope you'll do that. We've got so much to talk about today. This is an absolutely unbelievable day, last few days, even starting on Friday after the show. So first of all, breaking news, breaking-ish, last several hours, we've learned that Canada, at basically the last possible hour, agreed to a modification of NAFTA to go along with the modifications of NAFTA that the Trump administration already arranged with Mexico. And really, there's two sides to this. One is the economic side. One is the political side. The economic side is it's really too early to tell because we have very, very few details at this point of what is in the deal with Canada. We're told that it does something to at least slightly open up the Canadian dairy market to American dairy products, which is fine. That's a good thing. And we're also told that it'll cause President Trump to back off his threat to impose tariffs on cars imported into America from Canada, which is good because those tariffs would be very, very bad for Americans as well as Canadians. So there's the economic side. Again, still a lot to learn in the details. My guess is that what we will learn eventually is that this deal is basically a wash in terms of improvement for the United States or not, versus the original NAFTA, which, despite what President Trump says, really was not a bad deal. It's an old deal. There are some things that probably could be improved in it, but you'll notice, if you pay attention to the news about the new deal, that there's a bunch of stuff in there for Democrats, right? There's a bunch of stuff in there to protect labor unions and environmental issues and things like that, which were just the kind of things that I really didn't like in all of the Obama trade deals, because they basically let us get away, or they let the other countries get away with deals that weren't as good for the United States as we would have liked them to be, in order to get them to swallow these other Democratic provisions that I don't think we really cared about. But don't forget, Peter Navarro, who is Donald Trump's lead trade advisor, is a lifelong Democrat, and he loves the unions, and he's just, yeah, I'll stop there. So on the economic side, I think we'll find out that this is basically a wash, and that it really wasn't worth the effort. It didn't accomplish very much for the United States, and it caused a tremendous amount of turmoil. And there will certainly be some areas, like with cars, where it's going to be worse for the United States than things were before. We'll raise the price of cars to American car buyers. Now, let's talk about the political side for a second. Politically, at least in the short term, it's a big win for President Trump. There's no doubt about it. People aren't going to be talking about the economics of the new trade deal very much, in part because we don't have all the information, in part because most people will find the economics boring, and in part because most of the reporters, even if they were to attempt to try to understand the economics of the deal, wouldn't understand it. So this is way more about politics than economics, and on that front, it is a much bigger win for Donald Trump than the economics are. So now what you've got is Donald Trump, he's going to say that he has reworked NAFTA, and I mean, he did. So he and his team did. And I should mention that when Navarro was on TV this morning, he gave a lot of credit not only to Robert Lighthizer, the actual negotiator at the U.S. Trade Office, U.S. Trade Representative, his title, but also to Jared Kushner, who apparently has been very involved in the process, negotiating with them, all night long, part of the team, along with everybody else. So that's kind of interesting. So congratulations to those guys for getting something done. So now going into the midterms, this is going to be really key, I think. President Trump, one of the things that he'll be able to do to get Republican voters who might be a little bit complacent to come out is to say that here's another example of a promise made and a promise kept. When's the last time you saw a politician doing that? When's the last time you saw a president of the United States saying he was going to do something and actually doing it? And we're doing these things for you that we promised we would do. And a lot of many voters, at least in, let's say, the industrial Midwest and some of those states that were sort of surprises for Trump, they might believe him and they might come out and vote in November. You tie that in with the slight modification they made to the South Korean trade deal. President Trump is talking about it as a whole new trade deal. It's not slight modifications, but still it's something he got done. It was stuff that he's getting done with Europe. And now we are actually getting to, in the most difficult way possible, but nevertheless we're getting to a more rational trade policy in the sense of, with a little luck, the United States will soon no longer be taking on everyone in the world at the same time in trade battles, and instead trying to get our trade allies and our long-term historic allies, right, Western Europe, Mexico, Canada, on our side to put tremendous pressure on China, which is really where the focus should be. And, I've been pretty consistent on this. I thought President Trump was wrong in a lot of his trade stuff. But when it comes to China, there are very good points to be made, and I've actually complimented and continue to compliment President Trump for being the first president willing to actually call out China for some of their trade abuses, especially the theft of intellectual property. And it'll be much easier, I'm not saying easy, but easier to get China to do something different than what they have been doing if you get the rest of the world on your side, and not just you trying to fight wars on 5 fronts at one time. Then you make peace with 4 of those, and suddenly you and your allies are all going after China at the same time and forcing China to do something different. Because as big as the United States is, we're not big enough to force the Chinese Communist Party dictatorship to do much of anything. On the other hand, you start getting the rest of the world, so you go from a modest part of their export markets to an enormous part of their export markets, right? You add Europe to the U.S., then suddenly you got some leverage on China. I wanted to share a little audio with you, actually, from Donald Trump in West Virginia on Saturday. I was reminded of this because a moment ago I was saying how President Trump could use the trade stuff that he's gotten done to make sure to tell his voters not to be complacent in November. And this clip I'm going to play for you is it's actually about 2 minutes long, but it goes by very quickly. And I do want to say that Trump on Saturday was really doing some of his very best work. Some of his, he's much better in rallies in front of people that he loves and talking about what he really wants to be talking about than he is at press conferences in front of reporters who he doesn't like, although he has fun messing with them, but taking questions on various things that he doesn't necessarily want to be talking about. So at the rallies, he's really in his element. And I didn't watch the whole rally on Saturday, but I'm telling you, he was on fire. Trump was really doing some of his very, very best work. Notice, by the way, in this, how he, and I assume this is intentional, how he intentionally mispronounces one senator's name.
We have the greatest economy that this nation has ever seen. Jobs and everything else. So we won, and we have so many things happening that are so good. So we should do well in the midterms. I can't imagine not. But you have to don't be complacent. The one thing that could happen.
So you got that? Don't be complacent. He's not done.
And the beautiful.
And he says, and the one thing that could happen, and then he derails himself into another topic. He'll come back to it, but now he's going to momentarily get off the complacency topic.
Thing that's going on over the last few days in the Senate when you see the anger, when you see people that are angry and mean and nasty and untruthful, when you look at releases and leaks and then they say, oh, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Remember? Dianne Feinstein, did you?
Dianne Feinstein. He knows her name is Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein, did you leak? And the crowd starts booing. The crowd goes wild in a Trump kind of way.
Remember her answer. Did you leak the document? What? No. No.
And you should actually go see the video of this. We'll put it up on the blog. But the way Trump sort of looks around at the crowd and he's turning his head back the way Dianne Feinstein turned her head back to look at her staffers when she was asked during the committee meeting, you know, did anyone in your office leak this? And she turns around and Trump is just totally shredding her. And I was literally laughing out loud as I was watching this. This was just Trump's best work.
Oh, I didn't leak. Well, wait 1 minute. Did we leak? No, we didn't leak it. I'll tell you.
Really, that was in the top 10 greatest moments of Trump rallies. And I'm not the biggest Trump rally guy, but he does his best work at his rallies for sure. And that was in the top 10, probably in the top 3. That was just, it was amazing.
You know what? That was really bad body language. Who knows? Maybe she didn't, but that was the worst body language I've ever seen. The entire nation has witnessed the shameless conduct of the Democrat Party.
And notice there he says the Democrat Party. That also pisses off Democrats because the real name is the Democratic Party. But actually, and I'll play some more sound for you, Trump actually addressed that very question, the party's real name. But let's keep going with this for a moment.
They're willing to throw away every standard of decency, justice, fairness, and due process to get their way. They don't care how they get it. You see it happening before your eyes. I think it's actually an incredible thing that's happening. And I just hope you don't sit home because bad things will happen if you sit home.
So he came back to that message, make sure you vote in November. And I think he's right to come back to it. It's a very important message. And I know that a lot of folks who I interact with here on the show and on Twitter, strong Trump supporters and the MAGA hat wearing folks, believe that Republicans and Trump supporters are highly motivated to get out there and vote in November. But I'm telling you that poll after poll after poll has shown Democrats way more motivated than Republicans, both more motivated than a usual midterm. Democrats way more motivated than Republicans. But, and I'm going to talk about this more later in the show, I think this Kavanaugh thing may have changed that a little bit. In a way that's good for Republicans. I think that a lot of the people on the left who would be highly motivated to vote against Republicans in November because of Kavanaugh, because of whether it's because of abortion in the Supreme Court or because they think he's some kind of sexual offender, I think those people were already highly motivated to vote against Republicans. I think they were already going to be out there voting. What I think this Kavanaugh thing has done is really, really pissed off the Republican base, including a large part of the Republican base that isn't necessarily fully on board with Trump, or moderates or libertarians like me who see the Democrats who we always knew were just willing to do absolutely anything to get their way. They don't care who they have to hurt to do it. They have just shown it in a way that the world cannot possibly miss. And I actually think this Kavanaugh stuff is going to increase the turnout of Republican voters more than it will increase the turnout of Democratic voters. And I I'm not saying that Republicans are going to keep the House. I don't know. It's a fool's errand to try to predict what's going to happen in this election. It is impossible to predict what's going to happen in this election. But I think the Kavanaugh thing politically is actually good for Republicans at this point. We'll see. Now, still so much to talk about regarding Kavanaugh, of course. Just after our show ended on Friday, we learned that Jeff Flake flaked. If there was anyone who was likely to flake, it was Flake. You know, Collins and Murkowski also sort of weak links. But basically what happened was, in fact, why don't I let Senator Chris Coons of Delaware tell you what happened?
Well, I frankly thought that we were going to go in the ante room and just have a conversation about how, while we respect each other as senators and hope to remain friends, that this was a pretty bitter moment for both of us, because each of us is on the other side of what ought to happen with Judge Kavanaugh. I was so encouraged when he said to me, you know, Chris, this whole thing is tearing our country apart, and we have to do something. We have to do something to show that we can hear each other, and that the argument that you're making, if we can find a way to set the parameters right, is something that we ought to consider doing. 1 week, not indefinite, not every possible allegation. The allegations in front of us right now. Will you work with me on that? Can you get some commitment out of Senator Feinstein that that will be the scope of this? And it started a conversation. And as you noticed, the two of us were back there talking for a few minutes, and then a second senator, and then a third senator, and a fourth senator came back, and ultimately we had virtually the whole committee back there having a very vigorous argument.
So basically, Chris Coons, Delaware Democrat, and Jeff Flake are friends. Flake felt apparently pretty conflicted by all of this, whatever. And so he went and talked to Coons, and then Flake said, you know what, we need to hold off for a week and let the FBI dig into this stuff. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about exactly what the FBI is looking into, what it seems like they're not looking into, and why Jeff Flake should have known that you can't give the Democrats an inch, because they will never, ever, ever be satisfied until they've got everything. We'll be right back.
This report is brought to you by your local Ford store.
Foggy conditions as you head out this morning. Monday morning drive. Some heavy fog to deal with. There is on the southeast and east side of town. Could be some flight delays out of